Hello, and welcome to Tiny Talk. I'm TheCosmerian, and today I have three very special guests. And this is actually a follow up to the Tiny Talk episode we recorded previously because we just had way too many people answer to say that they want to be on the podcast. And I decided that we'll just make 2 episodes covering this. It's a fun little thing, and so it doesn't hurt to have an extra episode dedicated to it. And so I will start by introducing me, and then we'll go down the line and introduce the other folks, including where they're located and a little bit about their LGS and their Tiny experience in particular. Like, what events do they host? What's the level of competitiveness, and so on. And also, how long have you been hosting Tiny Leaders gameplay? But as for me, I'm TheCosmerian. A little bit about myself. If it's not obvious, I am called TheCosmerian, and I have my little avatar based around Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. And so if you haven't read any Brandon Sanderson books, you should definitely read that. And if you want to ever talk Cosmere, hit me up on the Discord, and I will yap about Cosmere. And so, Wizard, tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about your LGS.
Hello. So my name is Nathan. I go by Wizard on Discord. I am from Huntsville, Alabama. The LGS's name is JC's House of Cards. Our Tiny Leaders experience. So we're a bunch of competitive players by nature, but we treat it kind of like a casual format. I don't know. It's weird to describe like competitive people playing a game casually. It's kind of weird to describe, but that's how it goes. Because we're a bunch of modern like tournament grinders that decided to pick up a Magic format for fun.
Hell yeah. And how long have you been playing Tiny Leaders?
We've been doing our Tiny Leaders locals for about 6 months now. Our primary event is our Sunday weeklies. We try to host a couple other events, which I may or may not have an announcement about later. Wink, wink. Um, but I believe we've done one win a box so far. But primarily it's just our Sunday weeklies.
Heck yeah. And Xaggaroth, tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about your LGS.
Hi, so I go by Xaggaroth in Discord. My name is Lucas. I'm actually from Newfoundland, Canada. It's actually a little island, which is pretty cool. We don't have like an actual local game store for say. It's actually a bowling alley called the Exploits Lanes, but they basically have like a room renovated for board games, card games, etc. Whatever you want to do in there, pretty much. So I started playing Tiny Leaders about 9 months ago, I would say now, and I think I started hosting tournaments about 8 months ago. So like I pretty much got a little group of people together to try Tiny Leaders. So it was actually from some more like competitive commander players, some more competitive modern players, also casual commander players. And some people that actually don't play constructed, all they do is draft. They also jumped in to play some Tiny Leaders, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. And Exilius, tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about your LGS.
Hello, I'm Exilius in Discord. From Monterrey, Mexico. I've been playing Tiny Leaders for 11 years at this point, but we play at the Goblin Depot here, and we host a monthly tournament the second weekend of each month, and it had just been the third anniversary of that tournament.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you are from the same LGS as Nucio, which we had on last month.
Yeah, exactly. We are partners in crime. Uh, I'm like, I am the organizer, but to be honest, Nucio does all the online, uh, administrative work. He keeps on the tabs on the tournament winners and everything. Uh, that's how we roll.
Yeah, awesome. And so, without further ado, let's get into the questions. So, the first question is, how did you get into TLR? So, this is instead of how did your group get into TLR, it's just you personally. What brought you into TLR? And we'll start with Wizard.
So I personally got into TLR. I think it was that Mill guy's first video about the format. I was just scrolling through YouTube or whatever. And at the time, I was actually a manager at my LGS. Um, so I saw this video about this silly format where you can only play three mana or less, and I'm like, that sounds funny. I want to try that.
Hell yeah. And Xaggaroth, how about you?
So I got into Tiny Leaders from basically we all just played Commander, and then one of my modern players who plays Commander from time to time made a comment. He said, "I like playing Commander, but my hands are too small to shuffle a 99 card deck. I wish there was something smaller." So I literally just researched it and found there was a Tiny Leaders Reborn format that had 49 cards, and then I just built a deck, built two decks actually, and got my friend to come over and we tried it, and it was a good time.
Awesome, love that. And Exilius, you've probably, of probably me included, even, you've probably been playing Tiny Leaders the longest out of all of us. What's your story there?
Yeah, I started playing on Tiny Leaders because I was too bad of being a commander player. We had our tiny group playing commander, but we went all over. We are old school players, so we went all over global destruction, wiping the table, excruciating time playing it. So people started going like, let's do this quicker. We got into tiny leaders, and I actually got into a tournament and I fell in love with it. That was 2015.
Holy, yeah. You've definitely been here the longest. Yeah, I got in here uh, mid 2023, I believe. And that was off of a Fish MTG video, as I've said at this point countless times, but it bears repeating. Fish MTG is what brought me into this, and I basically owe everything to her for doing that because I have had a blast with this format. I'm also very glad that I got someone like Wizard into this, at least inadvertently, right? I tried to. It was technically that Mill guy actually reached out to us because he ended up seeing the video one way or another, and wanted to collaborate because he played original Tiny Leaders and very much wanted to promote the format. And so I teamed up and I had an interview with him. And yeah, I'm really glad that, as well as his future promotions of it, got someone like Wizard into Tiny Leaders, who then went on to get other people into Tiny Leaders. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think where, Exilius, where did you have your Tiny Leaders tournament back in 2015? When, am I correct? This was when it was originally Tiny Leaders, not Tiny Leaders Reborn, right?
Yeah, you're right. We had it in a couple of stores, but the main one it's like in a commercial plaza in the middle in downtown, which is Garibaldi. Um, and they were like three tournaments, and then people got bored, and then I had to go like store by store asking if they held tiny leaders tournaments, and whenever I could, I pushed the format.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. So, does anybody else have thoughts on other people's stories? Do we want to just steamroll right ahead, or? All right. I'll take that as a let's steamroll. So, second question. Yeah, what? Oh, this. Okay. Yes, um, I, I guess I'm segmenting this question into two parts. The second part of the question, which probably should have been lumped in, I just didn't have the question list fully open. What led you to start your own community? And this could be just like this is more specifically what led you to start your own tiny leaders community. And Wizard, take it away.
So, following discovering that video, and I'm like, I want to try this funny format. You can't play anything more than 3 mana. I I mentioned I was a manager at my LGS, and I just started talking about the format, and I was like, hey, this seems really funny. I'm building this deck. All my regulars knew that I was like getting into this weird format, and some of them were like, hey, I played the old version of that. And then I started talking to my friends that I played Modern with, and I was like, hey, like if I build a deck, will you guys play with me? We should really try this. Um, and like it was not a very likely shot. Normally, I pitched that idea like, yeah, whatever, like focusing on something else within a month. But like for some reason, this idea they were just like, yeah, let's try it. And I showed them a couple of deck lists, and some of them were like, yeah, that's funny. So we just started playing tiny leaders, and it just kind of all became like a local hive mind. We were just like, yeah, let's all play this silly format.
That's awesome. Xaggaroth, what led you to start your own tiny leaders community?
So when I first started playing Magic 6 years ago, I basically got introduced into Commander. There was a small group of 3 of us from college, and apparently I accelerated a combo deck faster than the other 2 players. So another guy introduced me to like a more competitive Commander pod. So we basically played Commander for 2 years, and then my other buddy introduced me to dual commanders because he wanted like a more of a 1v1 competitive format. So I said, sure, I'll play it. So I played that for, I think it was a year and a half. We played that. Hosted a few tournaments from dual commander, and then, like I said earlier, my friend mentioned that comment that the deck was too thick to shuffle for his small hands. So I searched up tiny leaders. I'm like, this looks cool. So basically, I just started playing with one other friend, and just said, hey, everyone come out and try some tiny leaders. So I think on the first night, I got 15 or 16 people, I think. And normally on a normal commander night, we're lucky if we get 8 to 10. So it was almost double the numbers for people to try tiny leaders, which was pretty cool. A few of the players actually mentioned that they played tiny leaders. I assume it was the original format, like years ago. But they said they didn't play it right. They played it in a 4-player pod. I was like, that seemed interesting. But yeah, from then on, like we've just played it monthly tournaments, and we've gotten more people than commanders, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, more than commander is what we like to hear for sure. Exilius, how did you go about making your tiny leader community? If I remember correctly, you are the one that founded the tiny leader community in your area.
Yeah, it was like a 7-year wandering around the stores. It all started when the tournaments ended, like the first 3 tournaments. I just kept on brewing decks, and and I didn't have nobody to play with. So I started championing the format, and I encountered a couple of stores that held like 2 tournaments, but then a friend of mine opened up his store, the Goblin Depot, and he has given me the space, and we've been having like a great response. As I mentioned, 3 years of tournaments with 8 to 12 people from nobody playing in the area. That's like a huge uptick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Wizard, what's your like rough average for player count in your area?
A rough average for weeklies is usually 6 to 8 players. Um, we've been slowly growing that. I think I want to say this past week we had I want to say 10 players for our weeklies. We've been talking to more people about slowly getting into the format, but I think we average around about 6 to 8.
Gotcha. And that's 6 to 8 every week, correct?
Yep, just about every week.
Oh yeah.
The holidays kind of slowed it down a little bit, but
Yeah.
again, average 6 to 8 every week.
Neat, neat. Yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting how, there's these different reasons for kind of founding a community. But overall, it seems that unsurprisingly, a common thread between you guys is that you guys really like playing the format and are really passionate about it, which is obviously a great thing to have in a organizer for a format.
Definitely, I agree. My favorite thing is just picking the randomest commander that you would never see in regular EDH, that's 3 or less, and then building the deck good in tiny leaders, and people are just like, "What in the world is this?"
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are just certain cards within Tiny that you don't really see in other formats that are just crazy in Tiny Leaders specifically. Like there are so many removal spells, for example, that specify creatures 3 or less. That like, oh, so 2 mana remove any creature in the format. That's fun.
Abrupt decay.
Yes, Abrupt Decay, Long Goodbye, just so many like cards that don't really see play in other formats that are just absolutely busted to bits. Inquisition of Kozilek just being better Thoughtseize in this format is also really
Yeah,
good.
I also just really like, I think one of the big draws, which is definitely one of the things you have to be careful about. Although, from what I understand, am I correct that none of you guys' communities started in like legacy play, right? You have modern play,
That's correct.
Correct, yeah.
yeah, commander play, and then am I correct, Exilius, that you have more of a casual play group, essentially hailing from just casual commander?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So this is something where last month we talked with Laglaunt, and Laglaunt came from a lot of their player base came from Legacy. And so I always think it's interesting as somebody who doesn't play Legacy but kind of has a rough idea of what's banned and busted and stupid in Legacy. Just seeing all of these cards that are legal and also perfectly fine in Tiny Leaders, like Gataxian Probe, really good, banned in Legacy for good reason. But here it's like, as a one of and in blue, it's fine.
Exactly. Same things with stuff like Mental Misstep, where
Yeah.
again you're kind of limited to blue, but it's a counterspell that hits a third of the format.
Yep. Or Food Chain, which admittedly is kind of controversial. It's been on and off the lost list for like the past 2 years or so. Uh, but it's still something that's in the format and is not like immediately game breaking. So,
I can remember like I have a friend that would always mental misstep Soul Ring, turn one and commander. I've won several games in tiny leaders by playing mental misstep, Snapcaster Mage, mental misstep next turn when I'm tapped out to counter something. It's so good.
oh yeah, for sure. One of the entertaining things about my interview with the Red Bobcat was uh, him saying, "Man, people are really going to be interested in this format because you banned Soul Ring, and cards like Arcane Signet and stuff are just not good. So
Yeah, that was one of the big things that drew a lot of my players in, because with the majority of my players being modern players, not necessarily saying that all modern players are like this, but my group notoriously just hates Commander as a format. So finding a Commander format where a lot of these cards that would normally just be staples in Commander, like Soul Ring, um, finding a format where all of these cards are banned, they were just like, oh, okay, we can kind of like look into this a little bit more. It kind of like brought their guard down a little bit that this is a Commander format that's not quite like Commander, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I think this really does just go to show how in each group of people, and depending on what your local group is more well versed in, there's going to be different reasons why they'd be interested in tiny leaders. Obviously, we're only seeing the success stories. I'm sure that there's some people that have gone, "Hey, let's make a tiny leaders community," and then it absolutely flopped. But like, from these success stories, you're seeing all these different people with different formats that they had previously played going, "Oh, yeah, tiny leaders does this thing that I either like or dislike about the previous format that I'm used to, and does it better or cooler." So, on the topic of that, how did you guys go about starting a paper community? And, this is, again, more specifically in terms of tiny leaders. How did you get folks to play? What legs up did you have? What tactics or incentives did you employ? And we'll start with Wizard.
Um, that's a tough one. I know for one of my friends specifically, um, her a lot of her modern decks are very much like lower to the ground mana curve anyway. Like she plays a lot of or she did play a lot of Demir Murktide. She plays a lot of Yawgmoth. So obviously stuff like Grist was still legal. You still have Abhorrent Oculus, um, Psychic Frog. Like all of her favorite cards were legal in the format. And I said, hey, you can just build like an Esper midrange pile and see where it goes. And she said, yeah, you're right. So when she brought back to me her Grahatia list, it was literally just every good in modern Esper card that exists. That like the whole like Psychic Frog package, Abhorrent Oculus. I think she was reanimating or persisting Oculus at one point. But then it, like randomly, it also did just include like a couple of really good commander staples. Like you can't play Grahatia and not play Flawless Maneuver, you know?
Yeah,
So it
totally.
was just bribing her like, hey, all of these cards that you're already familiar with and that you already like playing with, you can just play in tiny leaders. And she was like, okay, I can build a deck that I'm comfortable with. And then from there, she convinced some of our other friends to play. Another one of my friends misses the good old days when Merfolk was good in modern, and then he found out you can just build a Merfolk list. So I think he built, I can't remember the name of the commander, but he built like I think it was either Mono Blue or it was Simic Merfolk tribal list. And it wasn't very good to start out with. He definitely recognized where he needed to like adjust the list, but it got him playing the format, and he still plays with us every so often. So I think it was a lot of just bribing my players of these cards that you're already comfortable with are stupid good in this format, so we can all play and have a good time together.
Okay, so like basically going up to each person and trying to negotiate with them.
To an extent, yes. I don't know if I would necessarily describe it as negotiation, more just like, hey, nudge, nudge, you can play this funny card that you already like to play with.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Uh, Xaggaroth, what was your strategy for going about starting a paper community of tiny leaders?
So there's a thing that Wizard mentioned earlier about modern players hating Commander around here. That was a thing here as well. But when I mentioned there's a Tiny Leaders format that's half the deck size and, Soul Ring is banned, Mana Crypt is banned, all this stuff, they were like, sounds interesting. So that's how I kind of bribed the modern players. Commander players, I just basically told them it's a 1v1 more competitive format that's still like Commander, but I said it's half the deck size, and the cost of the deck was also roughly about half. I mean, you roughly have the same mana base. You're going to take your most expensive lands, of course, but at least the other meat of the deck was kind of cut in half. So the cost part for the commander players was a plus for them basically, because they already have the decks made anyway. They just basically had to change the commander and kind of change a few staples.
Gotcha. And Exilius, you had like the hardest journey of trying to convince people, from what I understand. So, how did you go about it?
As I mentioned, I was such a brewer of tiny decks, so I always had like 5 different decks that I would carry to my local store, and I would just ask somebody if he wanted to try like the format, and I will tell them like the archetypes of the decks and everything. So I was like such an intruder. Uh, Also, I just got into like a commander pod and asked them to let me play my tiny deck, and I would say it's fine. You do your 40 life, you do whatever you can do, and I would go by my own rules. So I still had like at that time it was 20 life, uh, but I could combo on faster than they could. So I had that. Um, and now that you guys have been mentioning, the modern mindset really adjusts very well to tiny leaders. A lot of the people that has had some modern decks in the past tend to adjust more because of the speed the format it's going, uh, which I think is great because it brings a lot of competitiveness, from the format.
Interesting. So, what you're telling me is that if I want to seek out some collaborations with YouTubers, I shouldn't necessarily be going after the Commander YouTubers, but going after the modern YouTubers.
Yeah, yeah, like a lot of actually, like there is a book, uh, Next Level Magic, which talks about a lot of which wares like 5 years ago, which were was the current meta in modern, and that deck has like the book showcases like all the cards that go into tiny leaders, or at least like most of the staples, which is fascinating because it's a totally different format, but you would have just one of. Either you could do that, or you can go to the commander players, and just ask them to chop their deck, as Xaggaroth mentioned. That you just chop the deck, change the commander, and you basically have a commander and a tiny leader deck at the same time. So you could play 2 formats.
Interesting. I'll have to consider that.
On the topic of uh, collaborating with other YouTubers, I would absolutely giggle like a schoolgirl if there was a collaboration with Andrea Mengucci or somebody like that, like these big like ex pro tour tournament grinders. That would be so cool.
You know, I feel like out of all of the player people, Andrea Mengucci might be a good one to ask. We did reach out to Card Market, and they received it fairly well. They said, we probably won't be doing any sort of tiny leader stuff in the near future. However, we're open to it at some point. And so maybe reaching out to Andrea Maguchi, and possibly he could accept our invitation. Maybe.
Just saying, I think it would be a lot of fun. I think it would also be really cool to reach out to some of the Pauper community on this. If we could somehow do like a Pauper Tiny Leaders variant or something. I know that Cali Kais would probably be all over that. I don't know. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so on the Discord, we do have these little community formats where they're basically sub variants of tiny leaders. And so one of the more popular ones is Two-Headed Gnome, which is tiny leaders, but it's two-headed giant. Or I created Tiny Plus, where it is basically just if something could feasibly be cast for 3 mana using its own rules text, then it's legal. So cards with Affinity, cards with Delve, those are like legal, or alternate casting costs that are less expensive. And one of the variants was Pauper Tiny Leaders, which was honestly quite a fun time, which was basically PEDH, but Tiny Leaders. And so uncommon in the command zone, everything else common. So, food for thought.
That would be so much fun.
The Tiny Plus format you were talking about, so like Force of Will, for an example, would be legal.
Yeah, Force of Will is legal in that. Yeah,
Nice.
It's a very silly format that was a direct response to back in the days when we didn't actually have a legitimate discussion on how the format is going to handle exceptions. We just went with wizards on most things except for MDFCs because we didn't want to see Tybalt in the format. But there was somebody who kind of got really upset with the fact that Fire and Ice wasn't legal and went on a whole thing, and there was a lot of drama around it. And kind of as a direct response, as a trying to take it more in a lighthearted direction, I went, what if we just stretch that to its natural limits of if something could feasibly be cast for 3 or less, it is legal, and create a little sub format. But now, joke's on me, I guess, Fire and Ice is legal now, which is still a heated topic to this day. And the community has thoughts, and I slightly regret mentioning it in this episode. But it'll probably stay in because this is a fun tangent. That said, we should probably get back on track a little bit. Does anybody have any closing thoughts regarding the tangent or the previous question or whatever? I'm going to take the radio silence as nothing. So let's move on. This is a more interesting question and something that a lot of people have. A question that a lot of people have when making their own paper community is, how does your group handle the expensive nature of the format? So one of the big things that keep people from playing on paper is the fact that fully competitive decks can be upwards of like $800 to $1,000 if you're playing with true duels. And so we'll start with Wizard. How does your local play group deal with that problem?
So my group, I'm fortunate to actually have a bunch of players that are super chill as far as the proxy rule goes. All of our players are pretty much like, the financial barrier to entry into this hobby is there by nature, but also kind of silly. So initially, when I brought the idea of our Tiny Leaders events to my boss when I was working there, um, she didn't want to allow just like full proxy for our events, right? So we went by our legacy players rules, which was reserve list cards are uh, proxy friendly. So any like all the dual lands or anything else on the reserve list was proxy friendly. We added this stipulation I think maybe about a week later that cards over $30 by TCG player market price were also proxy friendly, just to get more new players into the format. Now that I have gotten a different job and I've left that LGS, we still play there, but since I'm the organizer, I can kind of just listen to my community and what they want to do. And we all voted that we would actually rather just full proxy for our weekly stuff and impose our previous proxy list on bigger events like winner boxes and stuff like that. So our weeklies are now just full proxy friendly. And we've been talking to a bunch of friends, which is part of the reason why the community is growing currently, is because, hey, you can full proxy a list and come try it out. And if you don't like the format, then you don't like the format. But if you do, then that incentivizes you to actually build out the list for when we do our bigger tournaments.
Hell yeah. And for your bigger tournaments, without $30+ cards and without reserved list cards, what is like the average price range, would you say, for the decks?
Without the reserve list and without the $30 plus cards, I would want to say that the average cost of the decks would be. This is a very rough estimate. I don't actually know this number. Maybe about $150. Because like the majority of our expensive cards are going to be like Orcish Bowmasters, or Ocelot Pride, or stuff like that. Well, no, also those are the a lot of like the bigger hitters, but also those are also over $30 market price. So with all of the other stuff, I want to say like maybe about $150 because we do still play with a lot of like the fetches and surveils and shocklands and stuff like that.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll probably mess around with one of my more expensive decks, and just basically cut out every card that's $30 or above and just flash a number on screen for how much that costs, just for an idea of the difference in price that rule could make. Obviously, if it's all proxy, then it doesn't matter, but yeah, I think that's a really neat rule. It's one that I haven't really encountered before. But I mean, yeah, if it works for y'all, then all is well. Xaggaroth, what is your group's strategy to dealing with the expensive nature of the format?
So there's one player here that actually owns several copies of all the dual lands. He's the only player that actually has a lot of dual lands. There's probably 3 other players that owns like 1 or 2. So the dual lands part is not really a big issue because there's very limited players that actually own them. Like I said, a lot of our tiny leader players are actually commander players. So they like a lot of the commander players have already had all the fetches, shocks, surveils, etc. So at my tournaments, I usually do no proxies allowed. People take that fairly well. There was a heated debate one time that I almost changed some rule to allow some proxies at tournaments, but I didn't. I kept it strictly no proxies. But every weekend there is a casual commander, and I find a lot of people do bring their tiny decks to practice, and I tell everyone like I'm perfectly fine with 100% proxy to practice your deck. Like at least if you have a new deck in your mind, you can at least proxy it and practice with it. Now, the rule that Wizard mentioned about proxying like reserved cards and $30 plus cards is interesting because there was a couple players that said they don't play tiny leaders because there's no proxies allowed. So I mean, I might, if I do implement a rule of some proxies being allowed, I might actually gain 3 or 4 extra players, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's worth noting. Now, this is not a thing to pressure folks, but the official stance of tiny leaders is that, we're fairly proxy friendly. Now, obviously, that's going to depend for paper. It's going to depend on the play group because, yeah, if you watched our previous episode on this, there was folks that were concerned about wizards, the WPN stores, and hosting proxy friendly events. And then there's also talk about, okay, well, having proxy friendly events that interferes with potentially folks buying cards from the LGS, right? So there's obviously stipulations, and yes, it will depend event from event to event. But if you're ever wondering, hey, what's the official tiny leader stance? The official tiny leader stance is we're not recognized by Wizards of the Coast, and so proxy away with discretion on specific events. But yeah, Exilius, what is your group's way to deal with this?
We totally shame the people who has proxies. Like, it's not that we don't like it. It's just that basically the players are the ones that Magic is expensive, and the more competitive players really put the money into their decks, so they do get slightly infuriated by just being proxies. So we have no proxies, although loans are totally permitted. So if whichever other player in the pool has the card that you need, and you ask him, and he will let you get it. So we're cool with that. Just no proxies.
Gotcha. And does your I vaguely recall from Nucio that there's not a lot of like true duels in your rotation. Is that roughly correct?
Oh, it's a shame to admit, but um, the one that has the most true duels, there's a couple players that have one or two, but not that many people. So I'm the culprit there on having the most expensive decks every time.
Okay. So basically, for the most part, you don't have to worry about true duels, but with a few outliers.
Yeah, and they are actually not that bad. Like, they aren't that much of an advantage. I tend
Yeah.
to rotate my decks, and they don't give you that much. Like, they are in par with whatever other decks do. They do come up good in 3 color decks, maybe, but that's like the max.
hmm Yeah. For 2 color decks, it doesn't make a difference. For 1 color decks, obviously, it doesn't make a difference. 3 color decks, it makes a little bit of a difference. You really just need to, you know, true duels end up helping a lot in 5 color decks when you're not having to shock yourself to get perfect mana. But yeah, I think I'm uh you know, I'm a big fan of proxies. But I also am not affiliated with any sort of LGS. And so I totally understand the LGS and the competitive player sentiment of the proxy bad. Uh, but I definitely I definitely have never encountered something like Wizards rules of reserved list fine, which honestly, that one rule probably like slices up the cost of decks, just because honestly, even if you just said true duels are fine to proxy, I think really it is just the true duels that is like the problem with this particular conundrum. Because true duels, you're running like $200, $300, $400 for a single copy. And otherwise, the format is expensive. It's roughly the price of a modern deck, as Wizard kind of mentioned. So
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I know that we have an Emery player in our locals, and the price of her deck with reserve list cards not proxied, I believe, triples almost. Because like there's so many of those reserve list artifacts that are just so good in her deck specifically. Um, and I know our Marath player recently got a full set of True Duels. So he's not proxying any of his cards anymore. And the price of one of those duels, I believe, totals my my poor little Ashiok deck.
yeah, it's this is not going to be the episode in which I go on a tirade about the reserve list and how it's stupid. But I think for the most part, most Magic players that I've come across are kind of in agreement that the reserve list is stupid. So I'm not going to go and talk about that. But it is kind of the one sticking point competitively and playing on paper is reserved list cards in an Eternal format. Obviously, if you are pandering towards a heavy legacy community, that's not going to be the issue because they already deal with that. But it can be a bit more of an issue if you're talking about modern players or commander players. I will say, for folks that are listening that for one reason or another haven't gone on to the server, one, you should do that. And two, we have leagues that we host every month, as well as little weekly round robin events that we host every week that are hosted over Cockatrice, which is a completely free platform that is a magic simulator. And so you can still very much play Tiny, just not necessarily in paper, for absolutely free.
Yeah, I've used Cockatrice before. It's actually takes a bit of a learning curve, but it's great. It's a great program to have.
Yeah. Is it as flashy as something like MTGO? No, it doesn't like. It's not like Arena or MTGO where it like automatically checks triggers and stuff like that. You have to do everything manually. But the big thing it has above Arena or MTGO is just the fact that it is completely free, which is why we use it. So, do you guys have further thoughts on this topic?
I do want to. I just remember an exception to the
Yeah,
proxy rule.
yeah.
We do allow commanders. If you don't have the commander, like if you hadn't like get the card, you can play with your cell phone.
That's wild. Okay. That's hilarious. Yeah. Okay.
It's just so fun seeing the people like it's like a little bit of shame, but it's still cool.
Okay. Time to find the most expensive commander you could possibly play and then accidentally forget to bring it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. That's cool though. Also, like Exilius mentioned, there's a few there's a few players here as well that really dislikes proxies as well, and that's another reason why I kind of made it no proxies at tournaments, because they put so much money into the game in the last 10 to 15 years that if somebody proxies basically the same competitive nature of their deck, they kind of like deem it as unfair, which I do understand, but I also understand why people want a proxy to not let the money be like a factor in why you can't be competitive.
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing, especially with just Magic in general, is that price range. And, you know, when you're playing competitively, are you on the side? Do you have the money to spare? And if you do have the money to spare, or you've already spent the money, then is it fair to those players to let everything be proxied? Or do you have to mix it up? Is it fair to the people who don't have the money to spare to make it not proxied, you know? So it's a very tough question, and it's kind of the reason why I brought it up here, is that this is one of the big sticking points for people trying to play paper tiny. And so it's interesting to see each of you guys' approaches to that. I think we're good to go on to the last question, which is, what advice would you give to people that want to start up a paper tiny leaders community? And we'll start with Wizard.
So I think the biggest thing, and I think this is a thing that's consistent across all of our stories, is just talk to people. It really just like plug into your community or find the community that you're already plugged into and just start talking about the format and just find connections between what you're already doing and tiny leaders and start connecting the dots for them. Because like I said, for my community, it was, hey, all of your favorite modern staples are really good in this format. I think we could have a lot of fun playing this between rounds, and just start talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. Xaggaroth, what's your bits of advice that you would give?
Um, Almost the same as what Wizard said. Pretty much get to your local area to play. You know, talk to people, bring up the format. Always bring 2 decks, just so if someone's interested in playing, you can also, you know, play the format with them. And then once you get people interested, I would say, you know, advertise what night you're going to play Tiny Leaders, you know, regardless if it's social media, um, like make a website, whatever you got to do just to advertise it more. One big thing I would tell anybody who's actually got a community with Tiny Leaders, and if you are the organizer, do not let negativity get to you, because being a leader is not easy. So like there will be people who don't agree with certain rules such as no proxies, or people might not agree with your price or prizes, etc. There's always going to be some people that don't agree with that. Just don't let the negativity bring you down. A leader's not Being a leader is not easy. So that's one big piece of advice I would give to anyone trying to start.
Yeah, that's something that like I slightly deal with, not to particularly that much of an extent, is just like people leaving little negative comments on either these videos or especially the collaboration videos, saying like, oh, like nothing format does nothing things or whatever, or this there's a good card in this bad format, or oh look, it's this soft format, stuff like that. But those are way easier to brush past, given that the format's growing faster than ever and is more diverse and healthier than ever. So I definitely think that like extra resilience when talking in person is a very good piece of advice for sure. Exilius, what's your advice that you would give to people wanting to start up their own paper TLR community?
If you're going to start from scratch, I would say you gotta do the field work. You would need 3 to 4 decks, and you will start to promote the format. Like you would really need to get to people, tell them how it's played. You can, as I mentioned before, you can go into any commander pod and just like let them know that you have this tiny leaders deck that you can try. And then while you play it, you would explain them that their commander decks can be used as a tiny little deck, and they will be more open to play with it. Um, I would agree on the negativity. Like, you would not believe how much dirt I got from trying to play tiny leaders in those first 7 years until it became something. Uh, but that's how people is. I mean, the very nature of being good in a format like standard or modern tend to, blind you of any other format. And one as casual as tiny leaders. So the experience is there. You just have to go to the people and just let them know how beautiful this format is.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the like most promising methods that I have kind of came across is building a sort of battle box or just having, 5 or 6 decks lying around. Because I think one of the biggest barriers to entry uh, for convincing people is, oh, I don't have my own deck. I need to make a deck first to even play the format. And being able to say, oh, no, don't worry about it. Here's a deck is really easy to do. Um, and I really like your strategy of just popping up to Commander Pod, say, hey, I'm going to play this Commander variant, which, you know, is going to be different. And you can play your normal Commander. I'll just play, you know, tiny leaders and then also try to convince you as we're playing to play tiny leaders as well. I think that's an awesome strategy.
Yeah, and it's so fun when they're expecting like the stones and everything, and then you just go off like very early, and they like, what's that thing doing? But then you run out of steam as the play goes on. But it's just funny seeing that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are you guys' thoughts on each other's thoughts? Got you like each other's piece of advice? I obviously you guys talked a bit about it. Anything you'd want to add on to that?
I do want thoughts on everybody, or I want people's thoughts on this topic. So I find like organizing the events now is easy. Like I have my routine, what I do, and I always check in. I always check in with the usual players. Like, hey, are you playing this Saturday or whatever date it is? My issue is the prizes. So like I usually charge $10 Canadian buy-in. Packs, a lot of people want booster packs for winning, so I usually buy, if we have 8 players, that's $80. Packs here at the bowling alley are $10 each, so that's 8 packs for top four, which is usually 4-2-1-1 or 5-2-1-0. But sometimes I feel like it's not enough prize support, so I'm just gonna see what you guys do in your Tiny Leaders tournaments.
So for my group, my players actually don't like receiving packs. I know for our Friday night modern or our Friday night magic is modern, and for a while my LGS was charging $10 entries, giving them a pack on entry, and then um, somewhere between like $4 and $5 of their entry would go back into store credit as well. Um, and after a while, our players were just like, no, we don't really like receiving packs. We just buy singles anyway because we're all building decks, and buying packs felt like a waste of time to them. So we ended up reducing the cost of entry for our Friday Night Modern, and all of that just went back into store credit, and they're much happier that way. And that's actually how we set up Tiny Leaders as well. Was just $5 entry. All of the money paid into the event goes back into the store credit pot that's paid out to the top three. Um, and that's how we've always done our pricing, and that's how our players prefer it.
It's
Yeah,
very
that's
interesting. We do exactly the same thing. Like it's also $5 and it goes all into the pot.
yeah, that's a good idea. I'm gonna keep that in mind. So there's been times where so basically I'm on a few marketplace groups in Canada on Facebook that people sell singles, usually like 75% face-to-face prices. So there's been times where I've scouted like staples. So like it could have been Verges, Fetchlands, Shocklands, Bowmasters, whatever. I've actually like purchased those cards out of my own money, and then I've hosted like a raffle so that people could pay $2 towards the card, and basically the winner, like I would raffle at face price, so the winner would get the card, but any extra money I've made I put aside to buy singles for a tournament 2 months down the road. It worked out good, but like I said, there's a few players that will give you these negative comments because they want packs, but it was a lot of work. I'm telling you, I did it every week for like 2 months and it was a lot of work.
The raffle idea I think is very interesting. I like the idea of buying staples for the format and then like maybe charging just like a little bit extra for entry and then doing a raffle at the end of the event. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've raffled like a 5 shockland set. I did 3 fetchlands once. I did a force of negation. I think there was I think I made enough extra money to buy an extended art Bowmasters that I basically said anyone who enters any tiny leader tournaments going forward, in 2 months' time, there's going to be a draw for this staple. So basically, if you entered 4 tournaments, you have 4 entries into the hat for an Orcish Bowmasters as a free card, which was cool. A player that didn't own one actually won it, so that was good.
Yeah, that's really neat. I know that Lagalont is kind of the king of prizing. Now, he is dealing with like a legacy pod, right? This is group of folks that have I think he has a fairly high entry price. I don't know the exact number. It might be monthly like $30-$40 entry, but then with that money he ends up buying a true duel or a collector box or set booster box. I know previously there's also been like a Nintendo Switch or PS5 offered. And so those are very lucrative prizes, but obviously, to avoid having to pay out of pocket, you need to have a higher cost of entry, which might turn off some folks.
Yeah, 100%. Wizard and Exilius. So you guys just do prizes for top 3 and not top 4?
I do my pricing for top 3 just because, again, we're averaging about 6 to 8 players. So top 3 just feels a little bit more natural. I imagine if we were to grow to maybe like 10 to 15 players, top 4 might be a little bit better. But that again, the community's growing, so we'll just see how that goes.
Yeah, it does depend on how many people is, but we'd have like but they don't really get that much. Like they end up getting like $3 or something. So it's not really worth it.
Okay. Does anybody have further closing thoughts, further questions you want to ask the group before we end up wrapping up this vid?
Just want to say thanks for some new ideas. It was a fantastic chat.
I've also gained some extra knowledge and some things I'd like to bounce off my players. So I think this has been a lot of fun.
I do have like something that I wanted to do, but I haven't done, which is if you buy a precon commander, which is the best adapted to be a tiny leader deck? That's a question that has been plaguing my mind, and I have downloaded the lists and everything, and I've been wanting for so long to have like the best pre-con tiny leaders, so to speak. But maybe if you guys have the time, you might do this task that I haven't done, and I've been doing this for like a year.
You could
Does
probably
sound interesting.
ask the tavern that, because I think a lot of people, there's some uh there's some people that would be very devoted to something small like that, I think. Um and so I could see some folks in the tavern going, yeah, let's do that. Let's see what are like the best pre-con decks to convert to tiny leaders decks.
I think that a deck that immediately comes to mind to answer that question would be actually one of the starter commander decks that they did somewhere around, I think, 2002 or 2003. The Selesnya Token Triumph with Amaria Soul of the Accord. I think just having like a solid like 2 mana green white token generator in the command zone could be a very effective strategy, especially with the some of the cards that just came out of Lorwyn. There's a legendary there's a Selesnya legendary Kithkin that the beginning of your first main phase, you can pay a green to flip it over, and then the backside is a Guy's Cradle effect for how many creatures you control. So I think that could be that could be really really good as a precon starter that you eventually just upgrade.
One that comes to mind to me is Terra from Final Fantasy. I've thought about buying that precon many times because I think when she has combat damage, you can pay 2 mana and bring back a 3 or less drop from the battlefield tapped. I think it is. That one seems to be pretty good.
We had a Terra player in our locals that tried it, and it was pretty effective. I will say, I think he played it as like a reanimator combo, and it did its work. It did its job. Plus, you're in Mardu. Mardu just seems like it's the best color wedge for this format.
Yeah, my most basic one, which I haven't checked out the list, but I know, I believe it's called Roar of the Elements or something like that. But the Marath precon, like Marath is such a such a good card in Tiny Leaders specifically.
I forgot Moose was a precon.
Yeah, yeah.
I hate the Moose. I hate the Moose so much. We have a one of the more vocal people that in the server, like sometimes even more vocal than I am. I don't know how to pronounce his Discord name, but he goes by Will.
Willowsh, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's our dedicated Moose player, and he terrorizes me with it every week.
Moose, 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 moose.
Because like I'm playing Mill, and then every time I somehow mill over the Flage, and I just don't have my grave hate, and he kills me every time. It's we joke about it. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
Well, I think that's a pretty good ending to the episode of just some food for thought. Hey, comment down below. What do you think would be the best precon that to convert to a Tiny Leaders deck? Exilius, are you imagining that it is fresh out of the box, just no edits, just take 50 cards out and make it a Tiny Leaders deck?
Exactly right. It would have to go like from the box.
Okay, okay. So, from the box, what do you think the best Tiny Leaders commander turned Tiny Leaders deck would be as a precon?
Before we go, can I
Yeah,
interject
absolutely.
one thing?
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that I may have like another tournament in the works. So I wanted to announce this on the podcast because I was
Hell yeah.
a little bit lackluster in my advertising of our last Win a Box. But my LGS, JC's House of Cards, we are planning to do another Tiny Leaders Win a Box tournament. And I was talking to the store manager earlier today. Unfortunately, she did not get back with me in time for us to iron out some details. But there will be an announcement made on the Discord when I do have those details. Sometime one weekend in February, we'll be doing another Win-A-Box tournament. And it would be really cool to see some people. Last time we had Skitter come from Georgia to play with us. And I think it'd be a lot of fun to have more people from the Discord or other people that are just interested in tiny leaders that happen upon this episode to come hang out with us in Huntsville, Alabama. Again, one weekend in February. Join the Discord for more details when I have them. Yeah, another Win-A-Box tournament should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. If you're in or around Huntsville, Alabama, or are willing to drive for it, and you have or want to have a Tiny Leaders deck available to play, am I correct that that would be using the rules that your group has, which is reserved list and $30+ cards are proxy friendly?
We've actually we lowered that recently, $20+. So
Okay,
reserve list
$20+.
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to make a deck and are around that area, it should be fairly affordable, and there's a chance to win a booster box. Do you happen to know what box, or is that still being ironed out?
That is still being ironed out. I aim for it to be whatever the most recent booster box is, which I believe was at the time we run the tournament will still be Lorwyn, which I would much prefer anyway. I would much prefer to support an in-universe set. So more than likely it's going to be a box of Lorwyn Eclipsed.
Awesome. Yeah. Anybody else have surprise announcements before we end things? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for listening. And as always, stay tiny.